All right, I'm Alexander Garrett, and today's Saturday Sit-Down is probably going to be one of the most adventurous ones I've had. For instance, have you ever been to a poker table with Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man? Have you ever been to a table with Leonardo DiCaprio? How about a multitude of Hollywood celebrities? I haven't, but my next guest has. Houston Curtis, wow, you have quite a story, and you've put it in a book. Welcome inside to my podcast.
Alex, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I produce radio, and on my radio show I produce, we just had the White House Secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, today. So it's a big day here in the household. So
that's huge.
Yeah,
it's
huge.
On
AM 970 The Answer with my host that I produce for, Kevin McCullough. So it's been a good day. It's been a good day.
You've been doing everything from the house, the whole deal, huh?
The whole shebang. I have my own studio that I can input the segments. It's wild. So, but not as wild as what you've done. So let's break it down for people. Where's your story, and why did you want to write this book?
Well, the first time I was approached to write the book, I was offered a lot of money to write it, and in hindsight, maybe I should have taken it, but I was still too close to it. There was a lot of devastation that happened in my life on the heels of the game, and then when Molly started calling me and picking my brain for like all the hands that were in the game, and she was trying to use them in her book and in the movie, I really thought she was going to tell a different story. And when it came out, to see how different, not that Sorkin didn't make a great movie, because it was an entertaining film, it's just not the truth. So I wrote this book just to tell the truth.
Let me get backstory. So Molly Bloom has been a movie, and you've noted the characters that have played such and such. I mean, let's be honest, Michael Cera playing Toby is a perfect match, isn't it? I mean, it's just one of a kind. But you see...
Well, I was good friends with Toby, so maybe I was too close to him to see that, Toby's a hell of a guy. I feel like he's really ran through the ringer on this, and he's never going to come out and defend himself because he's just too above it, I'm sure there's going to...
What's that? I guess you're not friends with him anymore.
No, I would consider myself a friend of Toby's, but when all this went down, it's like you're rolling with guys who, you're flying on private jets, you're living this certain kind of lifestyle. And, my life got turned upside down because of what happened on the heels of Molly's game, of our game, when Molly kind of gave our names to the feds. And B, that was happening at the same time as the market crash. So my business was collapsing. My house went from being worth $3 million to $1.1 million overnight. Then I wake up and I got a $750,000 lien on my house because of the information Molly gave to the feds. And I didn't want to be the guy. I was doing well, but not $100 million well. And I didn't want to be the guy bringing everyone down at the party. So I just kind of backed off, and and things just got worse and worse. And I had a heart attack, and I just never called any of those guys after that. I didn't want them to have to sweat my problems. They had enough of their own.
Well, so you did high stakes poker games, and it was pretty much all over the place. But when these games became too much, what was your breaking point?
The games got really high. There was nights when we were playing up to 1,000, 2,000 blinds, millions of dollars on the table, between everyone sitting at the table. I had a really bad night where I lost $1 million to Rick Solomon, the guy from the One Night in Paris video. Rick.
Right. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you've seen the video. And Rick was in kind of a party mode in his life at that time. Rick's a friend, and he's a great guy, but he was a little out of control at that particular moment in his life. And it worked out for him that night because he made a move. He kept calling when normally he wouldn't have, and hit like a 9,000 to 1 shot on me to river me on a run a river card for $1 million. And it was a move that, he never would have made with a clear head. But,
I got you.
And Toby called me on the way home, and he's like, I just want to make sure you're not driving off a cliff. And it was my wife's birthday that night. I was supposed to take her out to eat with my daughters, Chloe and Callie, and a bunch of family. And she had been at the Beverly Hills Hotel having brunch with Toby's wife. And, they all get the news, and she comes home, and my little daughter, Chloe, comes running into my arms, Daddy, Daddy. And I just burst into tears. $1 million at the same time that the market crashed. The same time that my core business in television and film and direct-to-video, I was getting stiffed from major distributors. It all came at once, and it was, it was really hard to, even cope at that point in my life.
Well, you talk about one of the shows you produced right here in the city, Showtime at the Apollo. Tell us a little about that experience, because that, from poker to the Apollo is a very different feel,
That got me into the television business, and I actually did most of that work from LA, believe it or not. It was Bob Banner produced that show, and I was 19, and I moved to LA to play guitar originally. I went to the Grove School of Music, and they didn't want to pay the license fee for doing Bob Marley or the Pointer Sisters or whatever it sounded like. So they hired me somehow. One of their producers had seen me at a showcase or something, and it was a lot of fun. And before I knew it, by the time I was 23, I was producing talk shows. I was doing the Jerry Springer show. I did the Gabrielle show, produced The Dating Game, and went to MTV and created a bunch of TV shows over at MTV.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this happened after your big losses, or was this in the midst of it, or before it?
No, this is all leading up to it. I was a self-made millionaire by the time I was 30. I moved to Los Angeles knowing no one. I had no rich uncle, nobody in the industry. And I don't know if you remember the video series. There's a video series called The Best of Backyard Wrestling with the kids beating the hell out of each other in the backyards.
Okay.
That was me.
Okay.
And so that made me my first $1 million.
Well, there you go.
Then I went on to do other family favorites like Ghetto Brawls and Brawling Broads and World's Wildest Street Fights. I'm sure you have them on your nice.
Well, that kind of, I guess, fed into World Star Hip Hop, because we see that every day on those sites now. But let me ask you this. So this is all happening, and then you have this big loss. What got you through? Would you say faith by chance would get you through that big loss and through the times after?
See, after the loss, what happened was... I probably won $15 million in the game over the 5 years that we played, but I had invested. I was the one guy that was singing for my supper, so to speak. I was investing that money into my company. A lot of these guys were done. They had made as much money as they ever needed to make,
right? And
they were never going to run out. That was the whole point of the game, to find guys who were never going to run out of money and never going to get any good playing at poker. So. Yet, I was still like a normal guy, so to speak. So I went to Toby and we made a deal. We actually scratched it out on a piece of paper that he would help float me that $1 million or the majority of it. And I would pay him back with 50% of my wins. And then after he was paid back, I proposed that I give him 10% of my wins with no exposure to my losses for like a year. He said, no. He said, I'll take 50% of your wins with no exposure for a year. Wow. So what that meant was
I even watching the movie, I didn't understand that term.
What it means is, if I win $100,000 on Tuesday, I give Toby 50. If I win $100,000 on Thursday, I give Toby 50. Next Tuesday rolls around. If I lose $100,000, I cover it all. Toby has no exposure to my loss. So I'm now even, and he's up $100,000. So the win rate has to be really high to sustain a deal like that. And our win rates were very high. He knew I could pull it off, but I was going to have to play
hours on end.
If you play that good, you get kicked out of the game in most cases. I had to dump a few along the way just to, make it look good. But, I won what a lot of people don't know is I won the $1 million back in like 3 or 4 weeks, but it was everything that happened on the heels of that everything that was changing in the market, and now I had to carry this big deal with Toby that was almost insurmountable, and my house gets foreclosed on, my family, I had 2 kids in private schools. They moved to Boston, where they can go to a great school without paying an arm and a leg, and then I end up, after pitching a TV show, I was in D.C., I think, pitching to the Discovery Channel. I'm just walking from my hotel to the Discovery Channel. I felt like I'd ran a marathon. Wow. And I'm like, what's going on with me? And I got home, and that night I kept waking up gasping for air, and I went to the emergency room, and they ran all these tests, and they couldn't quite figure it out, but they wanted to do this biopsy on my chest, and when they were doing it, I went into cardiac arrest, and I died on the table.
Oh, my goodness.
And comes out of it, so I wake up in ICU. I was in ICU for like 3 weeks, and I thought I was going to go in and go out. And I had an enlarged heart and cardiomyopathy, heart disease, and they ended up telling me a year later, after trying to fix it with medicine, the doctor sat me down and told me that I needed to get my affairs in order. Right. That I had 5 years. And when I heard that, I spiraled into, really hardcore depression. And I went back to Illinois, and I started writing this book. And I started writing the book. I started remembering the life that I had and remembering how I got it, which a lot of those stories are in the book, not just being in the big game, but how I made it to that point. And changed my medicine around. And one day I got a call, and I go into the doctor's office, and he's like, I don't know how this happened, but it looks like we beat it. Wow. I said, what do you mean we beat it? You told me it was unbeatable. He said, your heart is functioning just as good as mine is, based on these tests they did. So, I figure I still got a few hands to play.
Well, I was going to say, so you continue the poker, or did you stop? What did you do after you found a new life?
I'm kind of doing it. I'm in Phoenix right now. I had some investors bring me out here to open and run a new production facility. I also own an independent record label with worldwide distribution through Sony and The Orchard, and so they kind of partnered with me on that. And I started teaching. I started doing some consulting in the card manipulation arena. So one of the other things that we haven't really talked about is, since I was a child, I started studying card manipulation probably age 7. Right. And before I ever met Toby, I was playing in, some of the really big underground, mobbed up games in LA. And, I was a professional card mechanic. I could deal anybody any hand at any time. And now I'm teaching people how to protect themselves from that. And I have, clients.
So you've kind of overcome. I mean, I don't want to say it was an addiction, but gambling tends to go that route. Did you feel that you were in an addiction phase at one point, or how was that feeling?
Well, first of all, for your listeners out there, yes, people can become addicted to gambling. I've always been what a lot of people would consider an advantage player. So I looked at the game a little differently. Are you hearing the beeps that are coming through? I'm sorry.
I'm good.
Okay.
I don't hear
all right, as long as you're not hearing them, that's good. Sorry about that. An advantage player is someone who has an edge on the game. The casino has an edge on everyone who walks into it. I try and go into any game with that same kind of an edge. So I never felt that gambling was an addiction, but there was probably an addiction. Let me clarify that. I never felt gambling was an addiction because I was never really gambling. Okay. The game that Toby and I had, in my book, I compare it to when I was a kid. I had this video game called KC Munchkin. It's kind of like Pac-Man, only they let you build your own mazes. And I spent all day trying to figure out how to build a maze where the monsters couldn't get me. Wow. And I figured it out. And I rolled the game. I ran all the way up as high as the square would go, and it rolled back over to 0. That's what we did with this poker game. We built a game where we couldn't lose. And, these guys were never going to run out of money. They were never going to get good enough to beat us in the long run, and poker is a long-term game. You could have a loss on any given night,
right?
But you're not going to have a loss month to month, year to year, if you know what you're doing. And that's why so many guys can play professionally, and I always thought it was about game selection. So why I don't bother. I get no glory out of going in and playing in casinos with, big players, who a lot of them who are friends of mine, like, Phil Hellmuth or Phil Ivey or Andy Duke or any of those guys, because I would much rather beat guys with bigger bankrolls that play a lot worse, So it was never an addiction for me, but the lifestyle was certainly an addiction.
Well, I'd like to say it looks like you got everything together. You wrote this book, and obviously you had followers during that journey that inspired you to write this, right? I mean, you wouldn't write it because you didn't have a following growing from that. So what inspired, when you were starting to write the book, who did you write it for? Was it for you? Was it for us, the reader, to say, hey, don't let this happen to you? What was your motivation?
Well, I've always had like a romantic feeling about the gambling world and the poker world and the allure of it, and I just thought that the story is interesting of a story and a spin that Aaron Sorkin put on Molly's game. I just thought that the true story would be so much more interesting. Okay. And I'm finding from people who've read it, I've been very, it's been very nice getting all these compliments about the book. People who can't put it down. It's kind of a way of cleaning the slate for me.
I got and
yep. Toby's never going to go out and clear his own name with Molly, and she calls him a cheap tipper. The guy never gave her a tip less than $1,000 in his life. Okay, where I grew up in the Midwest, if you get $1,000 tip for something for serving drinks at a card game,
that's a lot of money.
That'd be a pretty good payday.
Let's talk about Molly. So you might write this book, and what's her reaction to the book? And obviously, you didn't like the way you were portrayed in Aaron's film, so that was a motivation to write the book as well.
Yeah, well, in the film, they have me coming in later in the game. They kind of, me and Toby started this game before Molly was ever involved. Okay. And when she gave her indictment to the feds, I was the first name listed. However, in the movie, I kind of come in a little later as someone who Toby was staking, who, produced schlock television and all this. And they cast a great actor, Bill Camp, but they cast a guy that was like 15, 20 years older than me at the time, who just looked really disheveled and like, his life was going straight to hell. And most of the time throughout the game, my life was probably the happiest I'd ever been. It was just near the end that it got rough. How does she feel about it? I'm sure she is, I'm sure if she could, she would put a lid on this book and wouldn't want anyone to read it.
Wow. So this is are you thinking of a sequel now? I mean, that's what kind of the pitch was. Are you thinking of like another movie to counter that movie?
We've already been in talks with, there's some producers and production companies calling us, and agents are calling, and we'll see. I've got a lot of things I want to do. I also am kind of putting my own TV development slate back together, and want to do some really cool stuff in the gaming and gambling arena, in ways, tell some stories that haven't been told in ways that they have not been told before. I would love to be able to create the next Ancient Aliens for the underworld gambling world, so that's a goal of mine. We'll see what happens. It's becoming starting to be a fun ride again. And, if anything, that's what I loved about it most when, I was driving to the Four Seasons or the Beverly Hills Hotel every Tuesday or Thursday night and, getting ready to sit down and play super high stakes, no limit hold'em. It was a fun ride, so I'm always up for a fun ride.
Well, yeah, you were around all these celebrities. Were you starstruck, or did you just see them as people? What was your thought process of them as you were sitting there at the table with them?
That was what was interesting about it. The first time I met Toby at the Commerce, they set me down next to him, and for whatever reason, him and I hit it off. I was already, pretty successful at that point in my life, and him and I ended up knowing a lot of the same people. But I noticed how all of the grinders there at the Commerce, like the guys who made a living playing cards, were really starstruck. Right. And it immediately started to record with me. I thought, man, this could really be good for if I could build a game around, and Toby was noticing the same thing at the same time. So when we got like Leo to come in and, play in the first weeks of the game, that was all part of the allure. Some guy will sit down and be willing to lose $100,000 just so he could say he played cards next to Leo DiCaprio.
Well, let me ask you this. Why is Jimmy Carter mentioned in the forward? What was his role? Is it the Jimmy Carter president? He's mentioned?
He is the Jimmy Carter, but he's Jimmy Carter, my brother.
Okay.
Yeah, Jimmy, we have different last name, but yeah, that's my big brother, Jimmy.
That's interesting. I was like, wait a minute, Jimmy Carter was? No way. Let's talk about...
But he'll love that you brought his name up.
Let's talk about why you became a quote-unquote deep throat of this ring with Dylan, the writer of the investigative journalism. Why did you become... why did you want to talk about it outside of the ring?
I'll tell you exactly why. And I believe, just so you know, what was happening is Molly's attorney was leaking information, and it was the wrong information.
Okay.
And you can say, Dylan is... If you really follow what he's done, he's big on reporting the truth, whether you want to hear it or not, And I wanted, when I was approached, I had already said no to a dozen reporters not wanting to talk. And me and Dylan sit down in this like dark bar in Hollywood and talked off the record. And this is after I'd found out all of the things that were going to go out because of what, was being reported from the other side. And I agreed to talk just so, at least some of the real story would start to be heard. And, that's how Dylan and I, met. And I got to tell you, I really appreciate everything he's done. When I called him, I didn't know I was going to be doing the book with him. I just said, hey, what are your thoughts? I think I'm going to go ahead and write the book. And he's like, let's do it.
Wow. Where does he work? What is this? Because I didn't know exactly the publication he was at.
All of them, man. He ran AMI, which owned National Enquirer, Star, Us Weekly, OK, Inside, all of them.
So the Post article that had Molly Bloom as arraigned, that was a real headline? Was that a real paper cover?
Which one was it?
There was a New York Post
headline.
Been a lot. Yeah, there's a New York Post headline saying Molly Bloom's arraigned from the New York Post. Was that a real cover that was published, or do you not know that?
Probably
in the
was.
Movie, there was like a thing that she covered up. It was kind of
in the movie.
Yeah.
If you can't find it on Google, then no.
I'll have to look further there.
If the only picture you can find of it on Google is from the movie, then it wasn't real.
Did you expect that to bring down the whole thing and actually end? Did you expect it to bring down the whole operation when you went to Dylan?
No, I mean, the operation was pretty much already down.
Okay.
Because it just wasn't public. But it was down because Brad Ruderman, the guy who's running the hedge fund, when he went to prison, it just changed everything, and I mean, they came after all of us. They put a $750,000 lien on my house, which already had declined in value by, like $2 million. So the game was done. There may be some semblance of it still existed, but it wasn't like it had been.
So you said this affected you emotionally. You went through depression. Talk a bit about that, because I feel like people today go through depression at the poker table, in gambling, whatever. What's your advice to those suffering from depression after some big loss, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, for me, it was having the courage to seek help. And I was one of those guys who I've been living a very heavy stress, in stressful environments my whole career. You know, like I said, I moved to LA when I was just a kid, and I had no connections or anything. It was hustle, hustle, hustle. And I thought I could take on the world. I thought I could handle anything. And when I couldn't sleep at night and I felt like I had, you know, never having it is one thing, but never having it, then having everything in the world and then losing it all is another.
Right.
And it was very difficult for me to cope with. And I finally just went, after I moved back home, you know, I think it was a combination of being back and being out of that LA bubble for a while where everything was all about LA. And, you know, it was about two things, LA and New York. And if you weren't in the LA and New York, you didn't matter. And it was nice to get out of that for a while and realize there's a whole world going on that I had like forgotten about. And some of the best people I'd ever met in my life were not from LA and they were not from New York. They were from the heartland, you know. And then I got some help and, you know, started feeling better, you know. That's where I would suggest don't be afraid to get help if you're depressed.
Well, there's a couple of things. So you were in the ICU. By the way, the ICU today is brought up a lot because of coronavirus. And heart attacks are still happening. Anyway, in that ICU, and then with your family, how worried were they for you during all this? Because you mentioned your brother earlier.
Well, I tried to shield my mother from it as much as I could because she would have just lost it, you know, and she was back in the Midwest. So I just tried to, I don't even think I told her I was in the ICU, you know.
Okay.
I just told her, you know, it's nothing, Mom. It'll be okay. So that's how I dealt with Mom. Sadly, my wife at the time, Bonnie, her mother was also sick with some rare lung disease that came out of nowhere. So while I am at Cedars-Sinai going through this, she was in Boston at the bedside of her mother, who unfortunately passed not long after that. And you know, I felt pretty alone at the moment. You know, I don't want to sound like, you know, but you know, it was kind of a lonely spot to be in.
Sure.
You know, when you and I've never been one of those guys who you know, gets like emotional at the drop of a hat or something like that. After this, you know, the smallest things would make you, you know, well up. You know. Yeah. It was quite an experience to go through. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, that's for sure.
And I'm sure families today are going through that because they have loved ones alone in the ICU. It's really horrible what's going on today.
I got to tell you, man, it's so sad. One of the two instances that just happened to me in the past week and a half. So sad. One of the people who's closest to me in my life, she's like a second mother. My best friend's mother passed away. And they were only going to allow 10 people to the funeral, period. And then I had another very, very dear friend whose brother's wife died in an accident. And same thing, you know, just broken up because no one can go be there by his side. He couldn't even be in the hospital when she took her last breath. How sad is that?
It is.
So, and I really hope this ends soon. It's a lot of people that I've seen on Facebook and a lot of the social media, they're really starting to go stir crazy. It's affecting a lot of people the longer we're stuck in here, you know?
So were you behind bars as well with all of this ring, or did you avoid jail time? What was that whole experience with the FBI like?
There was when they were trying to take my house, they were trying to foreclose on my house because I had the $750,000 lien on it from Ruderman and then the market dip and everything else. I was fighting it and trying to stay in the house as long as I could, using different methods and sneaky attorneys and stuff like that.
Okay.
And, you know, and the company that had kind of acquired it from the bank they had done the paperwork, but they didn't have it yet until I was officially out. There was some little loopholes that I was playing with. And at that point, I didn't care. I was gutting the place. So I was selling the Wolf Oven. I was selling the Viking Range fridges. Bonnie and the kids are already gone. So it's just me in this big house. And the guy comes up to the door one day with a sheriff.
Okay.
And he says, he starts yelling. And I said, wait a minute. I said, officer, how do you know that my stove just wasn't working and I'm replacing it? And why is this guy standing in my backyard saying he can see me taking stuff out of the house? And the officer said, look, I'm just here because he called me. This is technically a civil matter. I said, so are you going to arrest me? And the officer said, no. I said, great. Then get this guy the hell off my lawn, which he did. But then that guy went and he called around and he found out something that I didn't even know. I had a warrant out of Las Vegas over a marker dispute I had with a casino. And it had come on the heels of, the collapse of 2008. Normally, I had $100,000, $200,000 markers all over Las Vegas. So I could walk into any casino and they'd just give me whatever I needed.
Wow.
And I had a losing session the last time I had been there. And I came back and it's like the world exploded. So it was taking me a little time to figure it out. They're supposed to give me a discount. And I didn't even know that the casino I was dealing with went into some kind of pre-bankruptcy and turned it over to the DA. Wow. And it just went to warrant. So I'm standing on my balcony the day after I had the cops boost this dude out off my yard. And I'm having a conference call with these guys out of New York. And I hear someone say, Mr. Curtis, put your hands up. And you got to realize I live in Sherman Oaks on a street like 2 doors down from Pink, across the street from the creator of Bewitched. Catty corner is Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I mean, it was embarrassing to say the least. But there were 2 undercover cops, and they took me in. I was chained to the back of a guy who had a tattoo on the back of his head with a senorita holding 2 Glocks, and it said FLAPD on the back of his head. And it was quite an experience. So, yeah, I did spend a little – they took me in on a holiday weekend, too, on a Thursday, so I couldn't even talk to the judge till Tuesday. And then they wanted all this money. This turns out to be a $100,000 marker that I was supposed to get a discount on, so I'd end up paying $80,000 and it'd be fine. I've now paid $135,000, and the juice that they put on it out of Vegas, they still want like another $40,000.
Wow. Well, yeah. So let's get some brighter conversation. What are your favorite memories that you want to tell us today about hanging out with all these people and in the elite poker games and whatnot?
Gosh, there were so many. I remember one time. You remember some of these things almost like it was a movie. We would take a private jet to Las Vegas every now and then. And one thing I really always thought was cool is whenever the jet would go off, like we went with Toby and his girlfriend and a couple of close friends. It was his wife at that point. They all immediately held hands. They'd reach out and hold hands. And it was like a tradition that they'd been flying private for a long time. So it was kind of like their way of praying during takeoff. It's little things like that were kind of neat memories. And when we're walking out of the jet onto the tarmac and Toby turns to me and he said, you feeling a little bit like a rock star? I said, yeah, it feels pretty good. So there were a lot of great memories like that. But, taking down a $465,000 night, or a $300,000 night over and over and over again, those are fun. But you tend to remember, and any poker player will tell you this, of all the good fortune you ever have playing the game, you tend to remember the bad beats more than anything else.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I had so many big nights like that. Fortunately, I'm able to recall a lot of them. Well, the first time Guy Laliberté played, the guy who created Cirque du Soleil,
sure. That
was the first night I broke $250,000 on my win rate. I won $250,000 in a night.
Well,
it was pretty exciting.
I lost my train of thought, but that's okay. So the casinos in Vegas, I mean, obviously they have prestige dating back to the Rat Pack. Did you feel the energy of Sinatra and all those guys while you were at these tables?
Yeah, you kind of do. It's, I mean, I don't know what energy they felt, but you do feel it's almost like you can stand outside of yourself and look at yourself and say, is this my life? You know, I used to go home at night after like a great night, and I would stand in my backyard, and I lived in this 5,500 square foot house. I was a kid who came from, you know, very humble beginnings. And I would look at the stars at night and look around, and I would say, man, I did it, you know. And those were great feelings. You know, probably those highs are what made the lows so much harder to deal with when they hit, you know.
Sure. Well, I'm just thinking, Kenny Rogers recently passed, and he had that whole "you know when to fold them" thing, and that was sort of an anthem.
You knew when to fold them.
Yeah, that was like an anthem for a lot of people. I think, I don't know, but it just seems like so. Anyway.
Yeah, well, Kenny got out at a good time, right when the worldwide epidemic hit, so he knew when to fold them.
That's true.
Ironically, that was the first one of Molly's first duties. Whenever the first night we met her, she was told to put together a playlist just to play some music. And she knew nothing about poker. And she put Kenny Rogers, the Gambler. It was like one of the songs that she put. We all looked at her and like, what are you doing?
Well, the conversation between you and her in the movie, at least, she was very tough on you. Was she as tough on you in real life like that? Like, we got to get you home. You've been here too long. What was that like?
No, Molly had no power. That's why I wrote the book. Molly made no decisions. Molly didn't carry any of the bank. Molly didn't decide who got to play in the game. Molly didn't make any of the rules. All Molly did was show up, get the hotel ready, and serve the drinks and call the players to come. And then we started giving her more responsibility, like telling her to go find players because she was making so much money in tips. You know, she needed to increase her responsibility. But she was that scene in the movie where she says to everyone, okay, guys, here's the deal. You get a seat for a year if you quit going to the Viper Room game. That never happened. The Viper Room game stopped because Molly pleaded to us to let her still run the game when her and Darren got into a dispute. So we decided, okay, but we're going to kick it up a notch. We wanted at 5-star hotels and do this. And, you know, you're going to have to start singing for your supper a little bit, so to speak. Molly was the only person, Molly and the dealer, Manny, they're the only person who never lost in the game, you know? And when all of a sudden you're running a game where the hostess pulls up driving a brand new Bentley and you've got guys losing $500,000 a night, it doesn't look so good.
Well,
you know?
Let me ask you this movie about another movie that just came out with Brad Pitt and DiCaprio, 1969. I mean, I feel like Manson aside, that experience of being in the world of those wild days in the 60s, it probably was feeling like that for you, right? Like, did you resonate with some of it?
I could resonate with some of it. You know, there were always crazy things going on, you know? Like, I remember a night where we're sitting there with Joe Francis, the creator of Girls Gone Wild.
Okay.
And in walks Mary Kate Olsen. Oh. She was coming to visit this other girl she was with. Her boyfriend was playing in the game, and Joe says, "Hey, Mary Kate," and she looked at him. She said, "Do I know you?" And I quote, Joe said, "Well, you sure did remember me when you were snorting blow off in the back of my limo." And there was a hush. You know, everyone, like, it was dead silent. She looked like she was white as a ghost. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Toby goes, he started laughing. I started laughing. Everyone burst out laughing. She stormed out of the room. And I thought, man, that's, you know, talk about only in Hollywood. Yeah, that's the kind of thing that would happen.
Which coast is crazier, New York or California? I feel like both have their equal kind of crazy.
I would say that. Yeah. I mean, there's, I like the fact that New York, you know, technically never closes.
Right. Yeah.
And it's everything's so kind of squashed together. It gives a different energy. It's a little more gritty. But once you know where all the places are that are open after hours in LA, it has a similar feel to it, you know?
Okay. Yeah.
they each have their charm. But I think there's a thing about LA and New York, that it's kind of symbiotic, that the two are connected in a big way. And the people who live and work, especially in the entertainment business in New York City, have a huge connection to those who do the same in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest fault, if I were to fault the industry at all, it is a lot of times, they program to Middle America, but they don't really care about Middle America as an industry. And that's one thing I didn't.
And that's why Piers Morgan went off on them during his little speech there. I think that was at the Oscars, wasn't it, where he just went off on them, and everybody was like, "Wow, he just did that,"
Yeah. A few people tried to, step up, but I didn't even realize it till I got out of the bubble. I'm like, wow. I get out and I'm thinking, I don't necessarily want to hear a celebrity's opinion on, the world economy. I've met so many celebrities. Some are smart, some aren't so smart, but I'd rather hear a guy who has a master's degree in economics talk.
No, sure.
You know what I mean?
Hey, where can we find you, by the way, for Twitter, Facebook, on the book?
Yeah, so, and I'll follow you on Twitter as well. I'm at Houston_Curtis, HOUSTON _CURTIS. And you can get the book if you go to my website at cardsharp.com. That's with a K. I have an affiliate link to the Barnes & Noble, who's still carrying it right now because Amazon sold out. And with everything going on with the pandemic, it's kind of slow with, fulfillment these days. But cardsharp.com. And they can also check out a lot of my card manipulation tutorials and things like that at the website as well.
Well, I know you were wanting to do that on here, but one more question before we see that from you. You write this to clear your name pretty much, but I'm sure there's an underlying inspiration you want people to get out of the book as well.
I think if there's one thing I hope people take away, it's I get asked this question, would you do it all over again? Knowing what you know now. And I would. So what I want people to take away from this is live your life with no regrets. If you can learn to live a life with no regrets, then no matter how many highs or how many lows happen to you, you'll be okay in the end.
Well, that's kind of what we're in now, right? We got to just deal with what we got and don't regret this ever happened. It's just a lockdown, So hopefully we get out of it.
You gotta. There's something good that comes out of everything bad. Mm-hmm. And I've always just tried to focus on that because there's always going to be bad stuff happen, man. You can't stop it. Right. So try and find the good that comes out of it, and wrap your arms around that for a minute.
Amen. Hey, can we see a quick card trick before I let you go?
Quick one. Well, I tell you what. Next time I'm on, I'll get two cameras and put one on the table. But if you're sitting around at the table and you're losing a lot of money, and you see some really slick dude holding the cards,
right?
You may not always be seeing what you think you're seeing. And that's all I'll do for today.
Well, I gotta let you go for more because that was alone mesmerizing. So very cool. Hey, how many guys have reached out for podcasting and all that? Have you gotten a lot of publicity, and have you gotten a lot of interviews out of this? Or?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm going on Adam Carolla in early May. I've been on VSiN with Paulie and Mitch twice now.
Okay.
Been John B. Mills twice. I just did David Sussman yesterday, the whiskey show. His show. He was a really nice guy. So I'm doing shows every day. It's been a lot of fun. I would have loved to have done a few of them, in person, but I'm getting to do some things that I maybe wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So this is kind of cool.
Well, Houston Curtis, thank you for joining us today, and we'll send you the link when this is up, and we will talk to you soon. Let us know how the book is going, okay? And the movie project.
Yeah, anytime you want to talk, reach out, and I really appreciate you having me on the show. and I'll be following you on Twitter.
Very cool. I'm Alexander Garrett. We'll talk to you soon. Have a great Saturday. Well, thank you so much. This was really intriguing, and it was what I was hoping for. So thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Well, I look forward to seeing it all come together.
Very cool. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. See you, buddy.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, that's done.